Opinions on the new Super Mario Bros. Series are usually mixed at best. The prevailing thought has become, yeah, they're good games and all, they're fun to play, but they're all the same. The same worlds, the same enemies, the same power-ups, the same bosses, the same music, the same goals, the same visuals, the same collectibles, it's all just the same. And since these games have next to no story in them, there isn't anything but the gameplay and the presentation to latch onto. Rather than addressing any of these problems, Nintendo's response has been,
それをファック、あなたがより良くするのを見てみましょう。Assholes.
And by and large, we have. The thing is, while anyone can point out these problems, few have suggested any solutions. But I think I've got a few, and we'll be looking at examples from other series and franchises to get a better idea of how they managed to survive with the same core gameplay over and over. I want to take this one item at a time, so we'll be dividing this up into two large chunks, gameplay and presentation, because both are heavily lacking in the new Super Mario series. By the end, I hope to have some kind of pitch or outline or something for a new 2D Mario game that really feels like an evolution, something that lives up to the name and can take the series to a bright future. Let's start with the presentation. Very first thing, it needs a better name. New Super Mario Bros. Is already dated and untrue, and it was never a good name to begin with. Seriously, Wacky Worlds would have been better. Next up, the art style. The new Super games started pretty strong, with a very interesting, very distinct design that probably owes most of its good qualities to reused assets from 64DS. I don't know, there's something about this game that just pops, you know? As the series went on, the style was refined, sanded down, maybe molded a little bit, and oh, look at that. It's flat and boring. This may be some of the most artificial, sterile-looking visuals I've ever seen outside of a Game Freak game. It's just so bland. Like, they must have used some advertiser style guides or something. It's so predictable that you know exactly how a level's going to look before entering it. Meanwhile, the Mario franchise as a whole has embraced such variety in its history, with bright, childlike whimsy, distinct architecture, and wonderful blends of realistic qualities that make everything feel tangible. And that's without even mentioning the more unique looks of Yoshi's Island or Paper Mario. Everyone loves to bring up that one level in U based on the Starry Night, and yeah, as far as visuals go, it's gotta be a highlight. I wouldn't want an entire game to look like this, but I could easily imagine some kind of dimension-hopping adventure where every world has an entirely distinct visual style that Mario just invades. Hell, even the Smash Bros. Games, which are forced to homogenize everything into a uniform visual style, have bumped up the Mario cast and added some flair to them. At this point, just trying anything new at all would be an upgrade, or even going back to pixel art. Then we come upon the setting, and really, this has to be where the games falter the most. How do you make 4 games in a row with the same 8 worlds? How? I mean, you know what they are, let's list them off. Grass, desert, water, jungle, snow, mountain, sky, lava. In all 4. Really, even Mario 3 had the giant world. How difficult can it possibly be to come up with unique places to stage the action? You don't even need anything new. The rest of the franchise has given us so many kingdoms and continents and planets and dimensions that could be revisited at any time. Super Mario, Return to Bean Bean Kingdom, easy. And even if you have to stick to the Mushroom Kingdom, why not spice it up a bit? It's not like there's some deep lore here they have to follow. This place goes through entire continental shifts every few years or so. Bring back those tooth monsters that Bowser fought. Use the daisies some more. Just do something. The entire issue with 2D Mario's visual design can be summed up in one statement. They just aren't having any fun with it. This is a world with 8 distinct biomes, 1 specific form of technology, and all the biodiversity of the average suburb. Squirrels, turtles, and fish. Meanwhile, the 3D Mario games have gone absolutely nuts with their settings from the very beginning, where you could hop into a painting and end up in some flooded iron tunnels, or inside a clock, or whatever the hell Wet Dry World's supposed to be. It's all about doing something new and unique. Oh, there's also this weird thing where every level takes place in some horrible void with no escape, where nothing makes sense and things are just there. You know, even Meat Boy justifies the saw blades with cabins. Now, moving over to the audio side of things, I won't claim to be an expert in sound design, but it doesn't take one to see how lazy these games can be. Sound effects in Mario are generally distinct in a familiar way. Like this still sounds like the same thing as this. But the new Super series takes it a bit too far. I don't know if they think it's good for nostalgia or just pure laziness, but it's one of those small things that kinda makes these games feel cheaper than they should. The music is some of the most forgettable I've ever heard, and the gets annoying, but newer Mario games have settled on this great jazzy kinda sound, so I doubt that would be much of an issue with any future entries. I hope. Now, while I'm pretty confident that Nintendo could get away with releasing the same game again with a bit of a graphical makeover like the Yoshi games, there's still room for improvement on the play side. Stage-based Mario has a formula and it doesn't like to stray from it. Introduce mechanic, ramp up mechanic, throw some spin on mechanic, master mechanic, end level, mechanic gone forever. Throw in some collectibles with mini challenges to get to them, and it allows for very simple, predictable results that please a lot of people. Maybe they could get away with it if the mechanics were more interesting, like in 3D World, where the simple addition of a dimension can make something like swinging platforms worlds more exciting than it is in 2D. But honestly, I think the real downfall of the formula is that it doesn't do a lot to keep the game from running together, and it all boils down to jumping on platforms to avoid the bad thing that makes you play the level again. There are ways to overcome this. They could shake up Mario's moveset like the 3D games do, building stages tailored to new specific moves that Mario will never have again in future games. The 2D games kinda try to do this with the power-ups sometimes, but really, how much mileage can you get out of the squirrel suit? Not much. There's also the option of taking the Mario Maker route and combining a bunch of unique mechanics together in every level, taking these versatile design elements and using them to build something new altogether. This could further be strengthened by just expanding the levels. We don't really need hundreds of different stages in every game if the challenges presented were able to evolve and grow in unique ways for longer. For example, let's look at the World 2 Castle in NSMB on the DS. The first part of the level has spiked balls rolling toward the player that they need to dodge. Then the next part adds in a terrain manipulation button to make the player create the slopes for the balls to roll on. Then they fight the boss and the level's over. Future explorations of the spike ball mechanic are relegated to different levels where they need to be reintroduced and built up the same way again. Imagine if instead, the spike balls were there for the length of 3 or 4 levels, all their mechanics explored, the player forced to time their ground bump buttons to launch them into a goal or use gravity-based platforms to force them into enemies, and then give it a boss fight where the player has to use the spike balls in some way to defeat it. You can do this with just about anything in these games, like freezing fish in an underwater level to use as platforms could become so much bigger with just a bit of creativity and mixing of the right mechanics. 2D Mario in its current state takes every mechanic and throws them in the trash. Honestly, it's just plain wasteful. Then beyond its own core design, there are things that most 2D platformers today will do that Mario just refuses to try. Stuff that other Nintendo platformers do. Going between layers of the world is common in all kinds of games, from DK to Yoshi to Kirby to probably a bunch of indie games that I've never played. You have Sonic Mania, a retro revival game that's taking new leaps and trying things that I've never seen in a platformer before. And Kirby, possibly the most stagnant franchise in history, still throws in something new to differentiate every game from the last. And then there's this one idea from a recent Ceave Gaming video that I want to talk about. He spends most of it talking about Bowser's Fury, but toward the end brings up how Odyssey's platforming segments manage to be more fresh and exciting than anything in a game like Mario U, twisting around the 3D surfaces the levels are built on and playing with gravity or whatever else when it suits them. He also suggested that they could combine 2D and 3D Mario games into some kind of great hybrid thing, and, well, just watch the video. It's well written and high on fuzzies. So far, this has been entirely theoretical, and that's not gonna change. I don't know how to build a AAA Mario game, and even if I did, I'd be sued into oblivion for even trying. So I've got the next best thing. One concept for a 2D Mario game that could be an evolution of the series while maintaining what makes it compelling to begin with, and paying respect to a bunch of old stuff that Nintendo loves to remind you they made a few decades ago. It's called Super Mario's Wacky Worlds, because honestly, why the fuck not? This is never gonna get made anyway. I don't care. You think I care? Holy fucking shit. The basic conceit of the game is that somehow, a whole bunch of places and worlds have been smashed together. Rather than going through a bunch of levels, stage by stage, the game is more open like a Metroidvania, and structured similarly to one as well. Think of the whole layout of the game as essentially Mario Land 2's overworld in 2D, with several areas branching off of a middle point, with an added fast travel system and a lot of shortcuts to other worlds that can be opened up with progression. With this completely different basis, Mario's mechanics have changed as well. The basic movement would be similar, maybe a bit faster, with a few added moves like the long jump and dive from 3D games. Power-ups would be permanent, obtained through either boss fights or found in the world, with some sort of separate energy meter or maybe limited uses based on coins. There wouldn't be any lives to lose in this, or ways to get a game over, with carefully placed checkpoints to restart players at the beginning of a contained platform section if they fail. Health would have to be dealt with differently. I'm thinking with a limited number of hits that can be regained in some way, possibly through their own dedicated mushroom pickup. Throughout every large section of the world would be a whole bunch of collectibles and things to hide, with something like the star coins or green stars remaining aiming as the main barrier to progression and unlocking more areas, some requiring power-ups to reach them. For example, you'd need the spiked shellmet from Mario Maker to break through certain blocks. Each segment of the world would be distinct, with wildly different themes. You could do anything here: the Bean Bean Kingdom, space stuff, old Mario, other Nintendo games, and entirely new places to explore. There could be puzzles, taking power-ups to their extremes, exploring how a fireball or a big shoe or a dinosaur or a super badass grappling hook or whatever could be used in different ways. The whole game would be a big mix of elements from other games and genres that work well with the basics of 2D Mario: the running, jumping on enemies, swinging from things, the moving platforms, and maybe it could even make use of the format itself like those parts of Odyssey. Anything's possible. Now, maybe you think that's some fan game level bullshit that would never work in a real game. Maybe, but you know what it's not? It's not the same engine, using the same format from decades ago, with the same mechanics and same design, same flaws, same bosses, same visuals, remixed and put through some Mario-making AI and released for the same price as a fully fledged, high-budget, 3 to 5 year development game like Zelda or Pikmin or Metroid Prime or any of Nintendo's massive titles that we all look forward to. Unlike New Super Mario Bros., there would actually be something new here, and I know Nintendo is capable of doing that. I've played their games. Sometimes they'll come up with something so different and interesting that they can turn it into a pillar of their entire company in just a few years. I just don't get how a corporation that used to be on the absolute forefront of creating new experiences has reduced the series that made them what they are today to the most bland and uninspired garbage this side of EA. Or, you know what, if it means they get to spend more resources on games like Breath of the Wild and Odyssey, maybe it's best that they've given up and just let people make the Mario themselves, as long as it follows their very specific guidelines and vision for what the game should be. God, this shit makes me so...